Hi, everybody, and welcome to Out of the Gate, Daily Racing Forum's weekend handicapping preview program. I'm your host, Dan Illman. Thanks so much for watching. Here's what's coming up in this week's edition of Out of the Gate. Daily Racing Forum handicappers Nicole Russo, Mike Beer, and I will take a look at three major stakes races from across the country on Saturday. The Red Smith on turf at Aqueduct, the Kennedy Road on synthetic at Woodbine, the Native Diver on dirt at Del Mar. The Timeform U.S. boys, David Aragona, Craig Milkowski, they'll have their Spotlight and Pace Projector segments respectively, plus best bets, horses to watch, and lots more. So let's break Out of the Gate. We begin Out of the Gate with our Horse Watch segment. Our colleague Nicole Russo has a horse to watch. Let's go to that segment right now.
There's a lot of two-year-old action on the Saturday card at Churchill Downs and plenty of interesting horses I could circle from a pedigree perspective. But let's take a closer look at one that jumped out at me in the 11th race, which we're looking at the field for now. I always watch for horses from this family. Frontman didn't show much when he finished 10th in his debut, sprinting earlier this month at Churchill. So you're definitely going to get a price on him. Since then, he's come back with a solid breeze, and I think he'll prefer this longer distance that he gets to go on Saturday. Not only is he by a classic sire in Pioneer of the Nile, he's out of a very well-bred mare whose family prefers distance as well in Arienza. We'll watch her here finishing second to Joyful Victory, a very talented race mare in her own right, in the Grade 2 Fantasy going a route at Oaklawn. Arienza, who was a winner at a mile at Churchill, is a daughter of 2002 Horse of the Year Azeri, who, while she hasn't replicated herself on the track, has been a solid broodmare, definitely a distance-oriented family. So I'm expecting Frontman by Pioneer of the Nile and out of Arienza to improve as he gets to go a route for the first time. He is my horse to watch for this weekend.
My horse to watch at Aqueduct last week, Dan, two-year-old colt trained by Chad Brown, but not your typical Chad Brown two-year-old. This horse is going to break his maiden on dirt. His name is Country Grammar, a two-year-old by Tonalist. They paid $450,000 for him back in April. Let's look at his maiden win here. He did debut on turf for Chad, but I think that might have been more just to get him a distance of ground. This is the rare two-turn dirt race at 1.1 miles for two-year-olds in New York. They don't run them that much anymore, but they ran one at Aqueduct. This horse showed good speed in this race. He kept right up on the pace. He is just going to keep staying on through the stretch. I really like the way that he finishes at the end of this race. Again, he's by Tonalist, so the distances you think work to his favor. He's got a strong Juddmonte female family on the bottom. I think there's forward to go for this horse, who got a 79 buyer breaking his maiden.
My horse to watch is a 3-year-old gelding that made his debut at Laurel last week, and maybe it wasn't a grand slam, but it was a solid double off the green monster for Benintendi, who went gate to wire for trainer Brittany Russell. Turning into the stretch, Benintendi's got 3-4 challengers right alongside of him, but watch how Benintendi extends. Once Sheldon Russell pushes the button, he draws away to win with an 88 buyer speed figure. This is a son of Take Charge Indy out of Nanny Sweep, who won the Grade 1 Santa Monica. This horse is a 3/4 sibling to a Grade 3 winner on the synth named She's Indy Money, a $17,000 yearling that resold for $270,000 as a 2-year-old in training. It took a long time for this horse to get to the race. His career debut in November of the 3-year-old campaign. If they can keep this horse sound, I think this horse has some talent and ability and perhaps could be a stakes horse sprinting down the road. Let's get to some handicapping. The Red Smith Handicap is the feature at Aqueduct on Saturday. Here's the field for the feature race at the Big A on Saturday. Race number 9 is the Grade 3 Red Smith. $200,000 is the purse. We are going 1 3/8 miles on the inner turf. For expanded stakes previews of many of the major races all weekend long, head on over to video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. This is a big field. Sadler's Joy is likely to be the favorite, and deservedly so. Many triple-digit buyers on his resume, dropping in class. Let's see if Nicole Russo is going to go with the favorite.
The Red Smith is run at the quirky distance of 1 3/8 miles. We're definitely looking for distance specialists here, and we have plenty in a full field and what I think is a wide open field. Sadler's Joy and Glorious Empire, both of whom have plenty of Grade 1 experience, look like the class of this field, but I think both have some question marks. Glorious Empire, who won the Grade 1 Sword Dancer last year, is making that crucial third start off a long layoff, but was well beaten in both those outings this fall and gets a tough spot here. That brings us around to Sadler's Joy, who is winless since early 2018. But by contrast, I think he's shown fight in his most recent outings. He placed in 4 Grade 1 races last year, including a third in the Breeders' Cup Turf behind Enable and Magical. He's coming off a pair of Grade 1 placings in New York, beaten less than a length in each while popping triple-digit buyers. You're going to watch him here finishing third, beaten half a length to Arklow and Channelmaker in the Grade 1 Joe Hirsch Turf Classic. While I do think this is a tough, solid field, no one else in here has faced the sort of competition he has. No one else has run the sort of figures he has this year. I'm thinking this is the spot for him to break through and get back in the win column. With him, I'd consider Nakamura, a winner at this distance this season. Most recently, a good second in the Grade 3 Sycamore at Keeneland. We've got the top 3 finishers from that marathon in here. Maybe not as stakes seasoned as some of the others, but he looks like a horse on the upswing. Tis a Slam has had an outstanding season as he won 3 straight graded stakes at Churchill and Woodbine before finishing 4th at the Grade 1 Northern Dancer. Can't ignore how solid he's been, but I do think he does his best work at Woodbine, so I'll stick with the New York-based Sadler's Joy and use a couple of these others behind him.
I can't argue with Nicole and Sadler's Joy in this race. He's a deserving favorite and here, a legit Grade 1 horse. He's just, to me anyway, way more fun to fool around with that prices, not when he's going to be, something less than 2-1 as he seems like he might be in this race. I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to go with Marzo, a horse who Mike Maker, we've seen this many times before, claimed this horse out of a turf race, thought distances were going to work in his favor. And once again, Mike Maker was right. Marzo now a graded stakes winner going long on the turf. Let's look at that graded stakes win right now at Keeneland. They stretched him out to 1.5 miles for the Grade 3 Sycamore. Yes, he set a perfect trip in this race, but once he was taken clear in the stretch, I really like the way he ran by the leaders, and I like the way he finishes this race off as well. He's on his wrong lead briefly in mid-stretch, but he does not stop running. He switches it back at the end, and he wins clear under the wire. Mike Maker has got this horse heading in the right direction right now. It feels like he's going to fall into a good trip in this race, and I'm taking Marzo in this race at 10-1 on the morning line.
The number 1 Tis a Slam at a 3-race win streak snapped last time out in the Grade 1 Northern Dancer Stakes. I'm not sure that race was really run to suit him. There was a runaway leader up front, and Tis a Slam made a move into the teeth of the pace to take over the lead 3/8 of a mile from home, but was immediately confronted by the odds-on favorite Old Persian and just had nothing left in the stretch. Now, it's questionable whether Tis a Slam at this point in his career wants to rate off the pace. He's probably going to have to do that in the Red Smith, Glorious Empire. There are some other speeds in here, but I like his inside post position. I like his consistency. There is no issue with the distance here. This horse has been consistent since day one as a 2-year-old. Tis a Slam, 8-1 on the morning line will be my top selection in the Grade 3 Red Smith. Craig Milkowski from Timeform US. He's got the pace projector for one of the undercard races at the Big A on Saturday. Let's go to that segment right now.
Hi, I'm Craig Milkowski at Timeform US for this week's edition of Out of the Gate. In my pace projector segment this week, I'm going to take a look at the 8th race at Aqueduct on Saturday. It's an allowance race for fillies and mares, 6 furlongs on the turf. And as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, it's a race that we have labeled as having a fast pace. We'll take a closer look at the pace projector in just a second, but let's look at a few things on the preview page. First, you can see under claiming that there are a few horses in here who are in for the optional claiming of 62.5. And then what I've done is highlight some of the horses that led to the race being labeled as fast. I circled the horses that are leader speed. That's the 5 Honey I'm Good and the 10 Kitten Covers Girl. Underline some of the trackers we see in here. And I've also made a few other notes. You'll see number 11, Circle of Love, is entered for a main track only. So if this race were to come off the turf, obviously this analysis isn't going to mean much. So I'm not going to talk about that one. One thing I do want to point out is that the number 9 horse, Golconda, who is listed at the bottom as also being entered to run on November 22nd, will be running in this race. As I learned recently, if a horse is entered to be run on consecutive days, and it's not a stakes race or a main track only, as this one isn't, that the horse does have to run on the second day. So I do expect that horse to be in the field and scratch out of the earlier race on Friday. Let's take a closer look at that pace projector. And what really caught my eye in this race is not just the fast pace label, but that we have 3 horses lined up right across the front. Just because you have a fast pace doesn't always mean it's ideal for closers. You might have a fast horse who's going to get an easy lead, but that doesn't appear to be the case in here. I want to take a closer look at those 3 speed horses, and we'll start with number 4, Miss Mystique. You can see by her pace by her past performances, she's not a need to lead type. She's only led one of her last 4 races, and the time she did that, it was with a slowish pace. The opening pace figure that day is coded in blue, meaning it was slow for the race. So of the 3 shown up there, she's the one that I would at least expect if a duel doesn't develop, she's the one I wouldn't expect to be in it. Number 5, Honey, I'm Good, has run very well since switching to turf. She obviously ran 3rd first time off a long layoff and then came back to win a nice race with a 105, a similar allowance race at Belmont Park. But you can also see before that she showed high speed on dirt, a surface where it usually takes more speed to make the lead than it does on turf, even sprinting. So she is the one I definitely expect to lead early, be right up there on the front. She did show she's able to rate a little bit last time. She was 2nd, a length and a half behind, and was able to make up that distance. But this isn't a horse who's going to want to come from off the pace. I expect her to be right up front and be hurt at least a little bit by what's expected to be a hot pace. The other horse to look at is number 10, Kitten's Cover Girl. She's another one that you can see pretty easily, likes to be right up near the front. She's led her last 2 time out in sprints. Prior to a layoff, she ran in a good stakes race with in a route race, but the pace was super fast that day. And the time before, when she didn't lead in a sprint, the pace figures were also red hot. 160 opening quarter mile for that race. So Kitten's Cover Girl is one who's shown high speed. Before I talk about my selection in here, I do want to mention the morning line favorite, and that's number 8, I'll Hand Al the Cash. I have no real knocks on this horse. I wanted to talk about her a little bit since she is going to take quite a bit of money in here. And I would say, if you notice on that preview page, we had a race rating of 107, and generally that means that's what it's going to take for a horse to win at this level. In this case, she's no real knocks again, like I said, but she just hasn't been as fast. She doesn't hold any particular edge on this field. It wouldn't shock me if she won, but I think she's a bit of an underlay coming off of that. Only a 104 is the best Timeform US speed figure she has showing in her PPs. She's also a horse that kind of likes to be up near the front, and seeing we have several other speeds in here, I'm not sure she'll be able to get that position. So the horse I did wind up going with, the filly, was number 6, Albertville. She's a horse who, this will be her 3rd start in the States. And there's a few things I want to highlight here. One, I always read the trip note, and you can click on those in the Timeform US PPs and get the expanded note. And I read that, and it seemed kind of interesting. I thought I remember watching this race, but I went and watched the replay, which in our past performances you can get by clicking over on the date and the track number. In this case, it was Belmont, September 27th. And while it wasn't a terrible trip by any means, she certainly did get boxed in at a key moment in the race. She was kind of full of run when looking for traffic. Made a nice run to get 2nd, but I honestly think she probably would have won that day with a cleaner run. It's kind of tough to get trouble in a 5-horse field, but she managed to do it that day. But this is a case with all the speed in here. She's a horse who, if you refer to that preview page again, she had much the best Timeform US late pace rating in here. She's not a horse who's going to be way back. She does have some tactical speed, but I expect her to run very well. She's 4-1 on the morning line, and anywhere near that price, she will be my bet in this race. So that does it for this week for Timeform US on Out of the Gate, and I'll see you again next week in my Pace Projector segment.
Are you a horse player looking to raise your game? For over 120 years, expert handicappers have relied on Daily Racing Form as their must-have source for news and data, featuring exclusive buyer speed figures, Timeform US pace figures, and integrated replays. DRF Formulator is the most powerful handicapping tool on the market today. Use what the pros use. Go to drf.com/formulator and enter code DRFTV to get your first card free. drf.com. Raise your game.
Storm from Racing Blue, a breakthrough in sports nutrition for horses.
Welcome back to Out of the Gate. Let's throw up the field for the co-feature at Woodbine on Saturday, the Grade 2 Kennedy Road Stakes, carded as race number 8, 3/4 of a mile on the Tapeta surface. $175,000 is the purse for expanded stakes previews of many of the major races through North America all weekend long. Head on over to video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. We'll get to the morning line favorite and the big name, the number 6 Pink Lloyd, in a second. But Richie's in the house, Mike Beer. This horse is no slouch, and he showed off a new trick rating last time out.
He's a very consistent sprinter. He loves the synthetic track, and he loves this distance. We got a replay of his most recent race. I really like that they got him up here last month to get a couple of races up at Woodbine, too. I think it gives him an advantage. You're going to see him here have to work pretty hard in this race, Dan, but that's what this horse does. He does not like to lose races. He sat off the pace a little bit. He's going to drive it down at the end. A really nice performance once again for this horse. I think he makes the lead in this race.
Yeah, he might make the lead in here, and he might be more effective even on the lead. He beats several of the rivals he'll be facing in the Kennedy Road in that race, basically the local prep for the Kennedy Road. Our colleague Nicole Russo has also taken a look at this race. Let's see who she likes.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not going to be too clever in looking at the Kennedy Road, as any way I try to slice it, 2017 Canadian Horse of the Year, Pink Lloyd, just stands out to me. Now, he's coming off that mishap in the Bold Venture, where, as you'll see here, he broke awkwardly, never got into the race, was deemed to have had an unfair start, and was ultimately declared a non-starter. Before that, he had won his first 5 starts of the season. He now comes into the Kennedy Road fresh, and he also gets a weight break from some of his earlier outings. Now, what I think gives Pink Lloyd even more of a leg up here is it looks like there's a lot of speed in this race. Pink Lloyd is another who likes to be near the front end, but he has shown the ability to sit just off the pace and then move to victory. You'll watch him do just that in the Grade 3 Virgil Stakes earlier this year. You'll watch him as he sat in third and then pounced to make the lead. He earned a 100 buyer for this effort. The figures at all his wins this year have been 97 or higher. No one else could boast those sort of figures. He should be able to work out a trip, as I said, sitting just behind the other speed. I think that class just prevails here in the Kennedy Road with Pink Lloyd.
It's pretty hard to argue with Pink Lloyd in this race. He's going to be a very short price, and it seems like he never loses at 6 furlongs, going 6 furlongs at Woodbine. I will take a small shot against him with Extravagant Kid, who's likely to be the second choice in this race. He is more of a turf sprinter, but he's run well on the synthetic surface, and he's run well on the synthetic surface up at Woodbine. We're going to show a replay of his most recent race. This is the Grade 2 Woodford at Keeneland sprinting on the turf, and he does not get the right trip in this race, and it's not Jose Ortiz's fault. He got him in behind horses in the stretch, and there's just nowhere for Extravagant Kid to run. He had plenty of horse. He did not get to use it. This is a better effort than it's going to look on paper for anybody who hasn't seen the race. You know, can he run his best race and take down a horse like Pink Lloyd playing that horse's game? I'm not sure, but he's got races that make him a contender, and he's going to be a better price.
I'll agree with Nicole in here. I'm going to go with Pink Lloyd, the salty champion. How do you beat Pink Lloyd? Well, he doesn't get out of the gate like we saw last time out, and he was declared a non-starter. It was actually a really good race when you watch it. He must have been 3-4 lengths slow out of it, behind horses turning into the stretch, got a split late and was running on. He draws outside here, and I think he's just going to work out a nice stalking trip with a good break, and he's just way the horse to beat, albeit at a very, very short price. We'll move from Canada to the United States, from Woodbine to Del Mar, from synthetic to dirt. The Native Diver is up next. Let's throw up the field for Saturday's DRF Race of the Day. It is the Grade 3 Native Diver Stakes, race number 8 at Del Mar. You can download free formulator past performances on the Race of the Day event page at DRF.com for expanded stakes previews of many of the major races all weekend long. Visit video.drf.com or the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. This is a 9-furlong race. Our colleague Nicole Russo is going with a horse that's taking a drastic cutback in distance. She likes zestful.
Well, the question with the native diver earlier this week, of course, was if Roadster, winner of the Grade 1 Santa Anita Derby, remains in the field, as Bob Baffert also has him nominated to the Grade 1 Clark next week at Churchill. Baffert indicated to our colleague Brad Free, as of filming today, Thursday, that he does intend to stay home and run at Del Mar. So I'm going to try to find you a longer priced horse to use with Roadster, or even to best him in a shorter field. I like that the front-running Zestful is cutting back in distance after his most recent outing that you'll watch here, where he finished a game second by just 3/4 of a length to a really classy horse in It's in the Post and the Grade 2 Marathon, which drew a solid field on the Breeders' Cup Friday undercard at Santa Anita. Before that, this gelding, a former claimer, had won 6 straight. When you look at the rest of this field, minus Roadster, I think he'd be getting some class relief off this most recent outing. And as I said, I like that he's cutting back a bit in distance for the native diver, where I feel that his speed makes him an upset threat.
Nicole's going against the likely favorite Roadster in this race. I'm going to go against Roadster in this race as well. I like the 5 Extra Hope. He's third off the layoff in this race, and he's stretching back out in distance. I think that's what this horse really wants, a little bit more ground to work with. We're going to throw up a replay of his most recent race, the Damascus at Santa Anita. He's going to finish about a length or so behind Roadster in this race. But I just feel like this distance was a little short for him. And also just this short field where he had to stay closer to the pace probably didn't work to his advantage either. All in all, I thought this was a pretty good performance for Extra Hope. I do like him stretching out in distance. And I'm just not a big believer in Roadster yet. Maybe he'll prove me wrong on Saturday, but I'm going to take a shot against him in this race.
That was a gentle way for Mike to put his feelings about Roadster, because before we went on the air, we were having coffee. He said, what a hideous loss by Roadster last time out. I have to admit, I completely disagree. I think Roadster needed that race. It was his first start off a little bit of a layoff. The 7-furlong distance was just a little bit too short. That's not some bum that he failed to run down in the stretch. It was actually the favorite in the race. Roadster galloped out real well. Bob Baffert's confident he's going to get the distance. The price is not going to be fun, 5-2 on the morning line. I'd expect him to go off shorter than that. But I think Roadster ran just fine last time out, and I think the 2 turns is just what he wants. Plus, he's got an uncoupled stablemate in here to give him a little bit of pace. I think Roadster is going to get back into the winner's circle for trainer Bob Baffert. Speaking of the native diver, that's David Aragona's Time Form U.S. Spotlight Race of the Week. Let's go to David.
This week's Time Form US Spotlight, I'm going to take a look at the Grade 3 Native Diver Stakes, the 8th race at Del Mar on Saturday, and it's a pretty small field of just 6 runners. Before we get to the main contenders, let's take a look at the Time Form US pace projector for this race. You see the number 1 horse leading score out on the front end. He is one of 2 Bob Baffert trainees, and here likely to be the bigger price of Bob Baffert's 2 runners, and you'd imagine that he would be in front in this race. He's been involved in some quick pace since returning from a layoff earlier this year, and also the one other horse that really has shown front-running ability in his recent starts, the number 3 Zestful, is coming out of some slower paced races. He was involved in the pace going 1 3/4 miles in the marathon on Breeders' Cup weekend last time, so you would think that leading score is just simply going to be faster than that horse and will have a clear lead here. Whether that translates to him being successful towards the end of this race remains to be seen. Moving on to the main contenders, the likely favorite is the number 4 Roadster. He's the 5-2 favorite on the morning line. He might go off a little bit shorter than that, given his reputation as being one of the top 3-year-olds out there, at least for the first half of the year. I thought his return last time in the Damascus was fine. He lost by a nose to Flagstaff going the 7-furlong distance. He was wide a little bit in that race coming off the turn, closed well at the end. Probably had dead aim on the leader, just couldn't quite get past that one in the late stages. Stretching out to the 1.5 miles here should benefit him. He won the Santa Anita Derby, obviously going this distance back in April, so he can get the added ground. Roadster has the talent to win this race. I just question if he really has any kind of major speed figure edge over this field. He's picking up some weight off of that second place finish last time, and that's why his Timeform US speed figures, if you have the weight adjustment on in your PPs, are not quite as high as you might have expected. So I'm using Roadster, but I think there are some other options at bigger prices in this race. The number 2 midcourt is one who might attract some support because he's seeking his 4th win in a row, and most horse players like horses coming off wins. I thought he won well enough in the Comet to the Top last time. He was pretty game to get the victory that day, running down 235, and the likely pace setter here, a leading score in the late stages. My problem with midcourt is his speed figures are just a cup below some of the others. His top Timeform US speed figure of 115 doesn't quite make the cut. He probably has to run a little bit faster to win this race. And also, he's a horse that is coming out of a race that I just don't really love overall. I didn't think the Comet to the Top was a particularly strong event, especially in comparison to some races that others are coming out of, so I was somewhat against all of the horses coming out of that particular race. The one that I've settled on actually is Extra Hope, who finished behind Roadster in that aforementioned Damascus Stakes. He was a closing third that day, third of just 4 runners, so he just beat 1 home. That said, they were pretty bunched at the finish. That was an evenly matched field, so I don't want to hold the fact that he just beat 1 horse against him. Extra Hope, I thought, of all of the runners coming out of that race, got the worst trip because, as we saw in Breeders' Cup weekend at Santa Anita, the kickback was pretty intense, and it was really hard for horses to run through the kickback. Most of the horses in that Damascus didn't have to deal with it, except for Extra Hope, who was behind a wall of horses coming around the far turn until the quarter pole, had to run through kickback in the stretch, and actually was finishing on best of all at the end to be third that day. That was only 7 furlongs. I don't care about his return race on the turf 2-back because he's not really a turf horse. If you go back to his 2-year-old into 3-year-old season earlier this year and later last year, he was a horse that improved stretching out in distance, so it stands to reason that he would improve stretching out in distance once again now that he's cycling back into form. I think he's going to be more at home going this 1.125 distance than he was going the 7 furlongs in the Damascus last time, and I think he's going to work out a pretty good trip in this race because, as you saw in that pace projector, leading score is going to be on the lead. I question him getting the distance too, and I don't think Zestful is quick enough to challenge him early. If Roadster is ridden from the back of the pack again, then I think Extra Hope is just going to work out a pretty good stalking trip, and I trust him to get the 9 furlongs more than a lot of other horses in this race. So if he's anything close to that 6-1 morning line, I think Extra Hope is the right value play in the Native Diver on Saturday at Del Mar.
Time for our best bet segment here on Out of the Gate. Mike Beer, Naira analyst, give me something from the Big A.
Yeah, Aqueduct race number 8. It's an allowance race, sprinting on the turf for fillies and mares. And I'm going to go with Get Mother a Rose, number 7 in this race. She just ran at this condition last time and was beaten as the favorite, but that field, first of all, was better, I think, than the field she's going to face on Saturday. And now we're going to look at the replay of this race, and you're going to see that Get Mother a Rose has a big excuse in this race. Jose Ortiz gets caught over behind horses in the stretch of this race, and Get Mother a Rose just has nowhere to run right at the end of this race when everything is starting to come together. He's totally blocked. He can't get this horse clear. She loses all chance right here, and the race falls apart in front of her. She's going to get a better trip in this race, you would hope. And I just feel like this is an easier spot for this 3-year-old filly who's gotten real good late in the year for Tom Bush. She is 9-2 on the morning line in this race, and I think she gets some redemption.
I had a hard time finding a best bet this week. I think the most likely winner on the Laurel card on Saturdays in the opener for Graham Motion, a horse moving from turf to dirt and dropping in class, but I think that horse is something like 4-5 on the morning line. Don't want to give that one out as the out-of-the-gate best bet, but I stuck with Laurel. Race number 8, the number 3 Major Flirt's going to be my best bet. Let's go back to this horse's most recent race. For this race, he was trained by the great Linda Rice and was stretching out and adding blinkers for the first time, which is just a potent Linda Rice move, and Major Flirt responds. This is a driving win for the $5,000 tag. Claimed out of this race, he's wheeling back on relatively short notice. These new connections are striking while the iron is hot. There is not a lot of pace in Laurel's 8th race on Saturday, and I think Major Flirt can get forward, turning back to 7 furlongs. 5-2 or 3-1, I think, would be fair for this horse. I'm hoping that Major Flirt has found a home on the Laurel circuit. We thank you so much for watching Out of the Gate, and we urge you to follow all of DRFTV's latest offerings on social media. On Twitter, please follow at DRF Video. And for the latest news and notes from America's Turf Authority Daily Racing Forum, please follow on Twitter at DRF Inside Post. That's it for this week. Best of luck when your horses break out of the gate.